It's kind of incredible what you've done. Like I know a little bit from your blog and how you started, the about section, but obviously there's little nuances that don't come up. So I'm curious to you if you can walk us through first, what is the mission? Like what is your focus?
Think the answer is ever evolving. I started my
Mm.
online presence back in 2014, which in online years is far more than a
You're
decade.
an OG.
And back then, it was really all about travel and teaching women how to do that solo, how to find the courage to go explore the world, even though it may seem a little bit scary. Whereas now I've entered my 30s, and I think that mission is evolving as I grow as a person. So I would say currently my biggest focus really has been talking about women and women's rights, but it's really informed and driven by the travels that I've done and what I've seen around the world as well. And I've really enjoyed pivoting to this kind of, let's say, maybe more unique angle because it just resonates so much deeper with me than doing, here are the top 3 hotels to stay in destination XYZ. And that content is lovely, but for me, what I'm doing now has really kind of, yeah, tapped into something inside that has been dormant or had been dormant for a really long time.
It's one of those really key shifts, I think, that you've done where you start doing something which is very almost skill based or like a generic type of thing, right? Like you enter a generic area. Mine was fitness, yours was travel. And then you start going deeper under the layers of it and really finding purpose with it. And I think that's so key because when you get stuck just on that top layer with what you're doing, like let's say, for example, someone's in online marketing and you're only on the online marketing and you're not thinking about like, who is this helping? Who's this empowering? What is it getting them? Life becomes very monotonous for you as an entrepreneur and a creator.
Yes, it does. I think my journey through social media has been quite tumultuous. I'm sure a lot of people will relate to that, but as I mentioned, I started back in 2014. I started as a blogger. I've always wanted to be a writer. So that's how it started off. And then I realized no one was reading the text if you didn't put nice pictures next to it. And then I realized people weren't looking at the pictures unless they were moving, i.e., they were video. So it kind of snowballed from a starting point that felt very familiar into something that increasingly felt less and less like me. And then around 2018, I had a proper quarter life crisis. And I had it, if I lived to 100, I had it at 25. So it will actually live up to its name as a quarter life crisis. As a result of that, I left social media altogether. I didn't come back for a year. There are still searches if you type my name into Google. It's a bit dark, but people thought I was dead. People thought I was dead. And I kind of had quit so cold turkey that I hadn't said anything. So that was fun.
Wait, we have to ask you about that because I know some people listening,
I
like
wrote
the
these down.
idea of not being on social media, especially then when it was, peak, peak, peak. What did you do in that year?
I got a real job. I started social media straight out of university. I never really had a proper job, and so I tried to figure out, what do I want to do? What is my skill set? I had at this point done my kind of freelancing online journey for about 5 years, and I was really worried that I was unhireable. But as soon as I quit social media as part of my quarter life crisis, I began looking into volunteering and I started looking specifically in the refugee sector, which is something that felt really near and dear to my heart. I think partly because I've lived the vast majority of my life as an immigrant and partly also informed by my travels. And I ended up volunteering in a refugee camp in northern Greece for 3 months. And off the back of that, I thought, okay, this is something that really matters to me. My background academically is in political science as well. So it was all coming together rather nicely. And I started working for a charity in London. I was working there as their marketing manager. And about a year in, less than a year, actually, I didn't even last the full year. I thought, mm. And so I got my all my courage together and I quit. My last day at that job was the first day of the pandemic and the first day of lockdown in the UK. So I really didn't quit to go traveling at the right time, but
So you try this, normal 9 to 5, 9 to 7, whatever, because You wanna see, right? You're curious,
Yeah.
and also I'm sure you burn out a little bit as a creator in the
Oh,
beginning, and
totally.
it
And not
feels a
just
lot. You also I mean, I imagine for at that time too, like you said, you're doing a lot more of the stuff that maybe is not as aligned with what you originally had hoped to do. Then the pandemic happens. I mean,
yeah,
it is funny because
it
you're
is
not the
very
first
funny.
person to tell me.
I know, it's such a why is this such a common experience?
There's like a whole segment of the population, especially women who are like ready to just go travel the world, live their best life, do it. And then it's like March 2020, April 2020.
I like that there's a contingent of us,
Yeah.
I think we're over it now, but, like, 2 years ago, we maybe would should have formed some kind of support group.
How did you pivot out of that then? Because you're at a point now where you're back to no job, but also you had stopped the social media stuff. It was like, is what that the point where you said, okay, I'm gonna come back into this more mindful of what I want to do, or I'm gonna take more time to figure it out? What was the thinking during that time of rest? Let's call it.
I'm giving you a very long-winded answer to what was previously a fairly simple question, but about 2 months into the pandemic, properly coming back to social media, I did have other projects that I was pursuing that were paid, so that was really helpful, but as we got deeper and deeper into the pandemic, I started wondering, well, maybe there's a better way of doing it. Maybe the fact I burnt out isn't fully on social media. Maybe it's partly on me and the ways in which I had been approaching it. And this more or less coincided with the advent of Reels and TikTok as well. And that was really where I started to, and this is so incredibly cheesy to say, but to start to find my voice quite literally. Because prior to that, it was all static images. And whilst I really enjoy photography, I definitely enjoy being behind the camera more than I do being in front of it. But as I said, because my online presence is so centered around me, it was just, oh, here's the back of my head in Mexico. Look, here's me in a really pretty dress randomly on top of a mountain. Why am I wearing this dress? I don't know. Probably because I knew I was going to be photographed. It just wasn't hugely authentic to who I am. I think it's not hugely authentic to who most people are, really. I don't think I was an outlier there. And I think there's definitely, space for that type of content. But when that content makes up 80% plus of what we see on social media, I think it begins to be harmful. And that's not at all to criticize the individual creators. That's more to comment on the general landscape. And so through the advent of video, I started realizing, well, maybe I can actually be a little more myself and see how that goes. And slowly but surely over the past few years, I got to a point now where my content is definitely the most authentic it's ever been. And I'm sure it could be even more, but it's a gradual journey and you keep iterating and figuring out how much of yourself do you want to share. I feel good about the content I make.
This is where I find it so interesting to talk to you because on 2 points. So one, I'll do ask you about managing the social media slash the burnout, finding that balance.
Yeah.
But the bigger one is how are you finding content that's authentic to you? What are you thinking about each time, or what's very helpful for you to research or do? Like, what is the process for you to do that? Because you have so much like beautiful engagement as well. So you're showing up as you, but you're also getting people who like really genuinely care more than just, oh, that's a beautiful dress, Sabina. Like they really care about what you're doing. And I
Yeah.
think everyone listening wants to create that. Like we don't want followers, we want community. So what do you think was part of it for you? Like what have you gone in intentionally thinking for this?
Fully agree. I think the community that has gathered around the Girl versus Globe brand, especially on Instagram, when I say I built it organically, that's about the most annoying answer a person can give, I think. I mean, the primary reason that people resonate with what I have to say now more than ever is that it's just more honest and it's less polished. And I think that plays a huge role. Anytime I notice creators with really engaged followings, audiences that really seem to care, 99% of the time, it's influencers that are themselves. I mean, listen, I don't know them in person, but if they're not, they're faking authenticity really well. So I would say that's the primary indicator of a person that is on their way to building an engaged audience of that kind. I think one thing that's actually working in my favor is the fact that I've been around for such a long time. And surprisingly, I really thought during my break of is she dead or what happened to her, people would have left. And to this day, I get so many people that say, "Oh, I followed you back when you started your blog in Russia in 2014." Which I was in Russia on a year abroad. I was studying there for 1 year, and that's how the blog came about. And that's wild to me. I'm like, wow, you've seen me through so much. So I'd say, yeah, authenticity is the number one thing. There are definitely things you can do kind of more practically and hands on.
What do you think I mean, well, first, I super appreciate that because I know I always I feel bad telling this story, but I always think about there was one person
Now
I
go
met.
for it.
It was kind of like if I was meeting you a couple years ago, I met someone that I had followed, and this was to her credit. It was still in the era of perfect picture time and everything is curated and no reels. And I met her on a retreat, and I was blown away at how different she was
Oh,
from her feed. I preferred how she was, but I couldn't get over the discrepancy with how it was
yeah,
portrayed online. Like she was a totally different person. She was this super like girly girl polished on Instagram, but you
yeah,
met her and she was like cursing and very real and authentic. And I
yeah,
was like, this is the one I want to see. And
yeah.
I couldn't continue to see her content after that because it felt like a total betrayal of who she was as a person. So I
Mm.
appreciate you saying this. But let me ask you as well, because I know people are curious. A lot of people are entrepreneurs, creators listening. What is some of the strategy that you're bringing to it? You're setting certain times to go in and you're engaging with X amount of people. Are you like categorizing your content by educational versus, like all the strategies that people talk about? Like, what is crap and what is real?
What is written? No, it's a great question. The problem with the advice I'm gonna give you, I'm just gonna caveat that immediately, is that by the time you've edited this podcast, by the time you've put it out, some of it will have changed because these platforms are evolving so quickly. It is really frustrating to be a creator in that sense, and it is really confusing. Obviously, as I've mentioned, I've been a creator for dinosaur years, but still, still there are times where I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. So it really depends on the platforms that you focus on. I'm gonna replying to your question, focus on Instagram, focusing on reels, and currently focusing on carousels seems to be the best strategy. With carousels, for example, fun fact that maybe not everyone knows, when the platform currently, again, this might change by the time this gets put out, the platform currently promotes them in such a way that it will show the first page of the carousel. But actually, if people don't engage with the first page, it might try with the second page or it might try with the third page. So, in creating carousels as opposed to static images, you are really giving yourself a lot of opportunity to reach people when you're creating them. I think you should bear this in mind so that each page can stand alone as a piece of content because if you don't, you risk the second page not performing well when it's shown in isolation, etc. I only very recently took my own advice, which I mean, story of my life, and I started creating carousels and they've been doing so well. It's really exceeded my expectations. So, yeah, definitely recommend those. I definitely recommend looking for music to put behind those. Do that with your reels as well. However, with Reels, you should also experiment with original audio. There is a lot of success, I will say, to be found in being someone who creates their own original audios. When you look at your Reels, you will notice that the vast majority of them are using sounds, trending sounds primarily, obviously, because those get pushed. But the ones that do really, really well, like above average engagement, oftentimes are people just talking to the camera in ways that aren't hugely edited and that use original sound. For newer creators, I think there's always a little bit of fear around producing content because, well, of course there is. Like, it's scary. You don't have that expertise yet. You haven't cut your teeth. You haven't done, the required 10,000 hours of something in order to become good at it. So it's really scary. Therefore, it seems far less scary to use a trending sound and not use your voice, not metaphorically, but literally try and use it because it does make a difference. It's much better. Your voice is much better at building genuine connection than just your face. I don't get embarrassed easily. And if you do, it makes your journey online far more challenging.
Fully believe this is why everyone does the trending audio stuff, and also why so much advice out there is on that or on like the faceless reels and stuff, because I think it's all easier and people are searching for that. They want to know, like, how can I do this without making a fool of myself, without people judging me? And I don't think you can.
And I think when people start their online presence, and this goes for me hugely when I was first starting out, they don't really know what they want. Like, they don't really know what their aim is. They're just trying something new, which is admirable. That's wonderful. And that's a fine reason to start. But once you progress a little bit, you're a few months into, maybe you're a year into your content creation, really think, why am I doing this? Is it just so I am creating videos that do well? Or is there an underlying strategy behind my business? That part took me a really long time. I think I'm slowly getting there, but it took me a really long time. Some people are naturally more business savvy. Some people, like myself, are naturally more creative. And I really just wanted to be creative. But now I've got to a point where I was like, well, money would be nice too, though. So, let's. So, with that in mind, once you have formulated some semblance of a strategy, really think about how your online presence is serving that strategy. For example, if you are feeling shy about being in front of the camera and you're saying, cool, I'll just do trending audios and I'll just show my hands, I'm not going to show my face, that's absolutely fine. But if your aim is to build a brand around yourself, you're going about it in a very confusing and long-winded way. If you want to become the brand, unfortunately, you do need to put yourself out there and faceless content and all these other niches. It's just not going to cut it, because how are people going to connect to your hands? And there are, again, to provide some nuance to this, there are ways of doing it. You can do really in-depth voiceovers where you get really, really personal and really raw and really honest. And that can work just as well as shoving your face in people's faces.
Don't have your face there. You're not the talking head, but you have your voice there at least, right? Like, so people can hear you. And I think too, I remember following this faceless account because it was just aesthetically really beautiful. And then she reached 10,000 followers, to your point about growing the brand. And she said, hi, surprise, I'm not going to be
Right.
faceless anymore. And she jumped to 100,000.
To that point about growing suddenly when you reveal yourself, that doesn't sound right. No, when you reveal more of your inside, really, but also, yeah, your face. I really pivoted at the beginning of this year. Prior to the start of this year, was really focused on travel still, and it was still a female travel, and there was a kind of feminist tilt to it, but I didn't fully lean into it. I was worried about alienating people. I was worried about making things too political. And then I reached a point where I just thought, no, fuck it. I can't do this anymore. This really is not who I am offline. In traveling the world, have seen things that I don't think are right, talk about things that matter to you. And I really thought initially that that was destroying my audience, because I did start losing followers. And then I can't pinpoint the exact point, but something shifted. I think I started this year with just over 200,000 followers on Instagram. I can't remember. I would have to go look at the screenshots. And I'm now at 460. And bearing in mind that I started back in 2014, 15 with my Instagram, it took me all that time, right, to get to 200. I have more than doubled that audience this year. And it was solely through being more myself and being quote unquote more controversial. Yes, I understand people shying away from controversy. You get a lot of negative feedback from a certain section of your audience saying, "Oh, why did you have to go and make this political? I was just coming to you for lighthearted fun," which I completely understand. But I think maybe this is my bias, or maybe this is the fact that I don't know, read about this stuff more than I should. I don't know. It's really hard to not be political. How do you do it? It's just hard to stay quiet.
It's honestly, you have to look back at it and like in 20 years, if I look at this and what I did and what I said, would I be
Yes.
proud of it? Or would I feel like I didn't do anything? And there are certain things you can get away with not being too political. Like, let's say you're in digital marketing, it's possible
Yeah.
that you can just talk about that. That's fine. If you are in travel, that is inherently political. That is like you're going to other countries, you're seeing other things. I found in wellness, which I didn't think would be political, definitely is. And it was the same thing, not in the same way, the language we were using
Mhm.
in fitness and how that was disparaging to women and how that did create like a certain level of it lowered self-esteem. And like when I came out and said that stuff, this was pre-pandemic or pandemic,
Yeah.
a lot of people left because I was doing YouTube regularly. A lot of people left, and I ended up closing down that YouTube channel. It didn't resonate to have that language anymore. And there were people who wrote me and said, I can't believe you took away those videos. Those were my favorite ones. Like, why did you take them away? And I was like, well, because I don't want to further contribute to you hating your body. Like, that's
It's
not
so
me.
of course, they're political in how they treat the female body and the mind. There are types of accounts where that wouldn't necessarily make
Mm.
sense or flow naturally. If you're offering a service, if you're offering education, depending on the topic. Oh, you see, I'm finding all these caveats. I don't know.
If you're doing a personal brand in particular, what are your values? Like, what do you believe? Are you pretending to be one person that you're not? Is there a way that you speak that you're not speaking because you're afraid of who it will alienate? And that was an amazing example. Bless you. She's getting so emotional, everyone. And I think too, the biggest point you made here, which is so important, is the be unapologetically yourself, really represent who you are. If there's something you are hiding or who you are, like bring it out. Obviously, say some stuff for you. I want to make sure that I go back to that one question, which is this is not as sexy, but how did you go back to socials in a way that you feel like you have balance and you don't have as much burnout with content creation? Like what are some of the boundaries and the parameters you have in place or the systems that help you? And I'm sure like sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better, but what do you do?
Are you saying boundaries and parameters aren't sexy? How
They
dare
are
you?
sexy. Okay, I was wrong.
I don't know that I'm the best authority on this. I don't know that I have found the best balance, to be honest. Only recently really started honoring weekends, for example. That's not good. I do have a few tips. I downloaded this app recently, actually. This is fully unsponsored, although I wish they would sponsor me. I've actually been emailing them and I'm like, guys, please. I talk about you all the time. It's this app called Finch and it's free. So, and this is going to sound so stupid, but it's like a little Tamagotchi type thing. It's a little bird. Yeah, I it does sound stupid. But anyway, it's a little bird that lives on your phone, okay? And you input these self-care tasks into the app, and every day you go through them and you do them, and then you tick them off on the app, and then the bird grows and evolves, and you can buy it new clothes and you can buy it new furniture. It is, yeah, it's really fundamentally incredibly silly. However, I have managed to stick with that app when none of the others worked for me. And I have actually been becoming better at looking after my mental health because gamification, whether we like it or not, it does work. It does work on the human brain. My bird is lovely. My bird has a fantastic wardrobe because I'm really on top of completing my tasks. It has lovely wallpaper in its little nest. And yeah, I don't know if there's something about that app that's really worked for me. And when I posted about it online, I think to this day, that was the most viewed story I have ever posted. It was in like high six-figure views.
What was the name? Say it one more time of the app.
Finch, like the type of bird. Finch,
Ah,
F.
finch. Yeah, like a blue finch or a
Yeah.
great I don't know if there are
Well,
blue
actually,
finches.
the color is completely up to you when you're taking time off work and setting strict boundaries is incredibly important and obviously incredibly hard if you're a creator when you can go into your office literally anytime. So one thing I've done is I've installed limits, screen time limits. I think it's called Screen Zen. Let me double check that. Yeah, it's called Screen Zen. Also not sponsored. Honestly, what am I doing?
How many hours a week do you think that you spend, let's say in Instagram, for instance?
It's annoying because we could actually look at the data, can't we? Screen time. Okay, now let's scroll to Instagram. For the week, so far we're at 11 and a half hours. Last week, 15 hours. And the week before that, 5, but I was on holiday. So that would be phenomenal, but sadly that is not accurate.
2 hours a day on average. I'm assuming not all of that is work. Probably some of it is just fun. Or I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe it is all work. Do you also
No,
scroll, like, for fun?
I think it's so hard when you're a creator, at least the way I approach it, to differentiate between the 2. I'll watch something, I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, this gives me an idea," and then, I'm back to my notebook and jotting down thoughts. I don't think I have the most organized brain in the world. I think for other people, there might be a greater differentiation. A lot of my friends have recently been, diagnosed with ADHD, and a lot of them are telling me to try and get a diagnosis. I was like, "No, I'm sure there's nothing."
I wanna ask this question. I know we're coming towards the end of the interview, but I'm really curious about this. So what is your creative process? You're scrolling, you're like, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'm gonna put it in my special album, or I'm gonna screenshot it, or I'm gonna take out my notebook and I'm gonna write, or every Friday I'm gonna look at my ideas." Like, or is it more, "What are we gonna do today?" Like, what is your approach with it?
It's definitely, jotting down ideas on a rolling basis. I have not a folder, just a note in my notes on my phone. That's where the vast majority goes. So I have one that's titled content ideas. Then I turn those ideas into scripts. Not that my videos are like fully scripted, but I still write out the entire script and then I freestyle on camera. And then it goes into my finished content folder where I archive it. And then if I ever need to refer back to it, I can. And I do also have a mild problem with screenshots. At the end of every day, I think I'll have like 20 new screenshots in the folder. When do I review them? Never.
I think I have 10,000 screenshots.
I went back like 3 months ago and I deleted all of them because I was like, "No, I think I actually have a problem. This is not okay." And my boyfriend said, "No, I think you actually do have a problem. You need to delete these." And then I vowed to never do it again. And then something happened over the past month and I have slipped back into my bad habits. So now I have 3,500.
For anyone listening, because I don't think we're the only ones. I think there's a lot of like screenshot hoarding happening. When I go on the plane, like if I have a longer flight, I will always do 45 minutes to just delete screenshots.
Let's get organized, maybe like a union.
But I love it. You do have a process though. So yes, you're screenshotting a lot. The idea that you're doing of archiving stuff is really great too, because we create so much stuff and then we
Yes.
never use it again. Isn't that like the beauty of repurposing that you can do that?
I also am conscious of the fact I put out a piece of content every single day, even on the weekends. Like on weekends, I just press upload and then I try not to think about it too much. But that is the one exception to not working on the weekends. That is so much, right? Like that's so much content we're putting out there and then never really repurposing it. Make your life easier.
Last question for you is kind of a fun one before we ask where people can find you. If you were not doing content creation and you weren't working in blogging, what would you do instead?
The nice different lifestyle. When I first started studying political science, I really wanted to go work for the UN. That would have been cool. I think I really would have struggled with the hierarchical aspects of it, and the kind of bureaucratic restrictive nature. I really, really do enjoy working for myself. But the alternative lifestyle that I am kind of thinking when I started my blog in 2014, it was to write. And then I told you, the progression of going toward then photography and then toward video. The writing passion never left me. I'm currently working on a book. I already published a book back in 2020, but that was a travel related book. What I really want to do is write fiction, but I am working on my debut novel. So if I manage to get that finished relatively soon, I will start looking for publishers. And then once I found a publisher, I want to see what I can do with that. And if I could pivot more toward the writing side of things.
I
I-
love a person going back to their original passion. I think most people listening, what they're doing is a version of what they originally wanted to do. For you, it
yeah.
was the writing, right? And when you get to go back to that, like the full circle moment, and now you have skills in another way as well. So, like when your book comes out, bam, it's all over social media. So, like you got the skills. Where can people find you, Sabina? Like where can they find everything that you're creating? How can they connect with you?
Most active on Instagram, which is at Girl versus Globe. It's at GIRLVS. And under that handle, you will find me on TikTok and on YouTube. And on YouTube, this is an exclusive. I will be relaunching my long form content very, very soon. As much as I love Instagram, short form video is very restrictive, and I talk about some pretty big topics in my short form videos that I think could benefit from a little more time and a little more detail. I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you so much for being here, for the laughs and for, like, the very real honesty.
I really enjoyed chatting with you. So thank you again for inviting me.